Have you tried every diet? Have you white-knuckled your way through these diets, had success, only to find that you stop making measurable progress? Do you find yourself going on and off diets constantly, unable to stay on the wagon, leading to the guilt-blame cycle of dieting? Most diets these days are defined based on what you restrict, reduce, eliminate, or obsessively measure. But if this is how every diet works, how can it be bad? Studies show that dieting is a risk factor for food obsession, cravings, disordered and emotional eating, and weight regain cycles, aka yo-yo dieting. Let's dive into the science to understand why cutting out foods doesn't actually help us reach our health goals. A 2017 study estimated that globally, 42% of adults are on a diet with the goal of losing weight, and an additional 23% of adults are on a diet with the goal of maintaining weight. In the USA, nearly half of adults are on a weight loss diet, and dismayingly, up to 77% of people regain all of their lost weight within 5 years. And look, my content is about health and not weight loss, and I'll cover the science behind health at any and every size in an upcoming video. Today, let's look at the psychological and behavioral impacts of restricting disallowed foods as a major contributor to yo-yo dieting, to build our argument in favor of letting go of moral judgments of foods and ourselves for eating them as a prerequisite for maintaining a healthy diet. In fact, most dietary templates are centered around what foods you restrict, reduce, eliminate, or obsessively measure. And to state the obvious, it's just not possible for all of these diets to work as advertised. Between them, every food, food group, and macronutrient is demonized. If you bought into every diet's claims, there would be nothing left to eat. And these diets are more likely marketed to you using a compelling narrative rather than a strong scientific foundation. And these diets teach us a dichotomous approach to food. A dichotomous approach to dieting refers to defining a diet based on a list of yes foods and a list of no foods, or variations of that concept like good foods and bad foods, red light foods and green light foods, points foods and no points foods. And dichotomous approaches to dieting increases the risk of developing eating disorders and regaining lost weight. The more we diet, the more we learn and internalize moral judgments of foods. And when we view certain foods as bad, we view ourselves as bad when we give in and eat those foods. Which is why dieting increases the risk of food obsession, cravings, emotional eating, disordered eating patterns, developing eating disorders, and yo-yo dieting. Have you ever told yourself that you're not allowed to have a food because it's bad for you? Or have you ever told yourself that you're not allowed to have a food because you skipped a workout or ate something else earlier in the week that was off plan? Or maybe just didn't like the number on the scale that morning? Then you might score highly in the dichotomous thinking in eating disorders scale. In a 2015 study, participants were asked to rate on a scale from not at all true for me to very true for me 11 statements, such as, I view my attempts to diet as either successes or failures, or I think of food as either good or bad. 1 to 4 points was assigned for each answer, altogether giving the participants a score on the dichotomous thinking in eating disorders scale. For every point higher on the scale, specifically the eating subscale, participants had a whopping 142% increased risk of regaining lost weight instead of maintaining weight loss. In addition, this study showed that dichotomous thinking, higher food restraint, and dieting all went hand in hand and were each predictive of weight regain. That reminds me of a joke. Why is it hard to get angry at a yam? Because they're such sweet potatoes. I hope that mom joke earned your subscribe. As I already mentioned, dieting is a risk factor for food obsession, cravings, emotional eating, disordered eating, developing eating disorders, and weight regain cycles, aka yo-yo dieting. According to a 1995 study, 35% of normal dieters progress to pathological dieting and disordered eating patterns, and 20 to 25% of those individuals develop eating disorders. And in a 1999 study, adolescent females in the severe dieting group, who also had high levels of psychiatric morbidity, had a 28% higher risk of developing an eating disorder within the next 12 months. We are encouraged to diet everywhere. When we're weighed at the doctor's office, the talking points of wellness influencers online, even the subliminal messaging we get looking at a magazine cover. So why is dieting, especially restrictive dieting, so bad for us? Part of the explanation here is that dieting is stressful. A 2010 study of dieting women showed that calorie restriction increased the stress hormone cortisol. Not only that, simply monitoring food and calorie intake without dieting increased perceived stress. And when we tell ourselves we're not allowed to eat a food, we're more likely to fixate on that food, to obsess over that food, and to crave that food. In a 2007 study, kids were given a bowl of red and yellow M&Ms and told they could eat as many as they wanted. In the first phase, one group of kids was told they weren't allowed to eat the red ones, but they could have as many of the yellow ones as they wanted. And the other group didn't have any restrictions on which color they could eat. In the second phase of the study, later that afternoon, both groups of kids were once again given a bowl of red and yellow M&Ms, but this time, all of them were told they could eat as many if they wanted of either color. The kids who were at first prohibited from eating the red M&Ms had an increased desire for them. When the kids who were first restricted from eating the red M&Ms were finally allowed to eat as much as they wanted of either color in the second phase of this study, they ate a higher proportion of red ones compared to the kids who didn't have any restrictions. And perhaps not surprisingly, the kids who had dietary restrictions at home ate the most M&Ms and total calories in the entire study, regardless of what group they were in. This effect has been measured in other ways too, like looking at our eyes. Dwell time, how long we look at a food, measures visual attention. And pupil dilation measures emotional arousal. A 2020 study presented kids with either fruit or candy and then measured attention and emotional arousal through eye tracking. The kids who were not allowed to consume candy at home reacted with higher emotional arousal than the kids who were allowed to eat candy at home. This is important because how we eat as children, including these types of responses of being drawn to a food that is normally restricted at home, is predictive of diet quality and eating behaviors as adults. This effect isn't limited to children. When we label a food as bad and tell ourselves that we're not allowed to eat it, the net result is that we become fixated on that food, and this can lead to what's called disinhibition. Disinhibition refers to the behavior where, after giving in to that one thing that was against our rules, that piece of cake or that day of being a couch potato, our health behaviors unravel, driving more and more unhealthy choices. Basically, disinhibition is the technical term for falling off the proverbial wagon. Disinhibition goes hand in hand with poor diet quality in a chicken and the egg effect. And prohibiting certain foods is more likely to cause disinhibition, including restricting wheat, dairy, and eggs. And for males, also protein. It's worth emphasizing here that this is different from abstaining from foods for medical reasons, like avoiding peanuts due to a peanut allergy or following a gluten-free diet due to having celiac disease. We're specifically talking about dietary restriction as a learned behavior, as part of a dietary template we've been sold through marketing claims as the solution to our health woes. And the more restrictive diets we follow, the more diet roller coaster cycles we go through, the harder and harder it gets to eat a healthy diet intuitively. Intuitive eating is defined in the scientific literature as eating when we're hungry and stopping when we are no longer hungry or we're full, and no restrictions on the types of food eaten unless for medical reasons. And the better we are able to eat intuitively, the more likely we are to have a healthy diet and healthy eating behaviors. The more likely we are to have better physical and mental health, and the more likely we are to maintain a healthy weight. How do we improve our diet quality without restricting any food? Well, that's what the Nutrivore philosophy is all about. The goal of a Nutrivore diet is to thoughtfully select foods such that all of the nutrients those foods contain add up throughout the day to meet or safely exceed our body's nutritional requirements without exceeding our caloric requirements. And on Nutrivore, we look at the quality of the whole diet. The Nutrivore philosophy appreciates the inherent nutritional value of foods, but no food is strictly off the table. Pun intended. When no food is off limits, no food choice is a bad one. And the Nutrivore philosophy fully embraces treats, cultural foods, and food traditions without judgment. So Nutrivore has a permissive dietary structure rather than a restrictive one. And if you're looking for a great place to start improving your diet quality while ditching the restrictive mindset, I suggest first watching my video on how any food can fit into a healthy diet, and then watching my video on the top 5 foods to add to our diets to support overall health.